Penguin Random House Audio presents The Rainfall Market by Yeong-Gwang, translated by Slin Jung. Read for you by Rosa Escoda.
Episode 1. The Strange Rumor. Somewhere far outside the big city was a place called Rainbow Town, and somewhere in Rainbow Town was a run-down, abandoned house. Rumor had it, if you sent a letter about your misfortune to this house, you would receive a mysterious ticket. If you brought that ticket to the house on the first day of the rainy season, you could completely change your life. No way. That's absolutely ridiculous. Everyone treated it as a fantasy at first, but somehow the story spread like wildfire, and each time it was told, it became more and more elaborate. But though the details were different, they all had one thing in common: the tokkebi. I swear, I saw them with my own eyes. The people who claimed to have visited the house insisted that behind its doors was a secret magical world with beings who called themselves tokkebi, people who looked human but weren't. Don't make me laugh. Naturally, people didn't believe those stories so easily. But Serin wasn't the only one who wanted to know more. Most people snickered when they heard about these tokkebi and their tickets, but Serin would pause with her spoon halfway to her mouth so she could learn more from the rumors. She even borrowed Secrets of the Rainfall Market at the school library, which was no easy feat considering how popular it was. Serin skipped lunch that day, and with the precious book finally in her hands, rushed to a corner of the library. Even the cover of the book was special. The publisher had obviously spared no expense from the way the cover changed color when Serin held it up to the light at different angles. She stared at the cover for what seemed like forever. There was a heart-stopping quote: "The truth behind the rumors finally revealed." And most importantly, the bright red bestseller mark stamped on the front. Serin hated books, but she couldn't pass this one by. She could tell other people thought the same because the book was already badly worn, even though it had just been published. Taking a deep breath, she gingerly opened the book. Ugh, really? Printed on the front flap was a picture of the author. He was smiling like a robot, and someone had drawn glasses over his eyes and blackened some of his teeth with a permanent marker, so it was impossible to tell what he actually looked like. The rest of the book wasn't much better. Serin found doodles, of course, and even phone numbers and email addresses people had jotted down in a rush. The penciled underlinings she could tolerate, but some of the pages clung together with something yellow and sticky, and Serin had to try very hard to pretend not to notice those. I'm only here for information. Despite all that, the book gripped her from the start. In the introduction, the author wrote about how he had gained entry to the Rainfall Market. He explained that his life had been hopeless once, and he was often in and out of prison. He used to be as sad as I am, Serin thought. Each time he was released from prison, the author wrote, he had wanted to make a fresh start. But because no one would hire someone with his past, he had nowhere to go and was completely destitute. Everything changed the day he picked up a newspaper to look for job ads. He spotted the words, "Tell us about your misfortune," and an address. The man had nothing left to lose. He poured out his heart on paper and sent it off by mail. To his shock, he heard back. He found a ticket in the letterbox alongside an invitation to a strange marketplace. Serin wondered if she might get a ticket. She tried to compare her life with the author's, but it was hard to tell who had it worse. Before she knew it, she was halfway through the book. Across the chapters, the author described the tokkebi he met and the wonders of the Rainfall Market. He had even included maps, almost like a travel guide. At the end of the book, the author described how he had chosen a new, happy future for himself at the market, and how that happy life came to be. He had always wanted to be a famous writer, and not long after he had finished writing the manuscript for Secrets of the Rainfall Market, He won a deal with the biggest publishing house in the industry. The rest was history. But while helpful, that information wasn't quite what Serin was after. This is it. The appendix in the back had everything she'd wanted. It was the whole reason she'd borrowed the book in the first place. She turned the page and saw a list of tips for sending a good letter, one that would get chosen. The writer swore that he had spoken with other human visitors to verify these tips. This was the real deal. Where did I put my pen? Serin pulled out a small notepad and copied down everything the appendix had to say about getting her letter accepted. It was better to be honest, rather than embellish too much. Believe it or not, the author warned, Tokebi could read people's hearts, so they could tell if someone was lying. He said that the Tokebi didn't care as much about your writing skills as they did about your circumstances. But is all this really real? At the very end of the appendix, the author wrote that the Rainfall Market had changed his life when all seemed hopeless, and that if anyone reading his book felt the way he did, they had nothing to lose by writing to the Tokebi. Back in the classroom, Serin could not concentrate. And not because her teacher, who insisted on wearing modernized hanbok clothing all year round, had a big hole near his underarm, or because part of his comb-over was hanging limp off the side, exposing his balding head. She couldn't stop thinking about the book. The blackboard was almost completely white with chalk, and the teacher was lecturing passionately about history or geography, she couldn't quite tell, with thick drops of spittle flying everywhere. But Serin's mind was on the Rainfall Market. It can't possibly be real, she told herself. She had to focus on her lessons, but shaking her head didn't help and only attracted the teacher's attention. Kim Serin, are you listening to me? The teacher was looking straight at her. Serin gasped. I'm sorry, sir. The teacher frowned and pulled his comb-over back over his head, then pushed up his horn-rimmed glasses and continued the lesson. But the chalks kept breaking, and he ended up getting mad at the blackboard, ranting about how people didn't make things like they used to. It felt like he was talking to her. Serin hung her head, her face bright red. A few of her classmates glanced in her direction, but no one tried to console her. She was used to that by now. When she got home, Serin turned on her desk lamp and, as usual, shuffled through the radio channels to find her favorite music program. The radio was probably once a classy bright red, but it had faded to the color of pink rubber gloves. For a long time, it had worked surprisingly well, but recently the old machine had needed a bit of encouragement from Serin's hand. Why does it keep acting up? She had a good reason for keeping the battered old radio, though. It was the last thing she had left of her father's. Serin didn't remember her father. All she knew was that he had died suddenly in an accident when she was young. Her mother had tried to throw the radio away many times, but Serin had insisted on keeping it. It was her only friend, a member of the family who filled the void in her heart. At 10 in the evening, the radio played the opening song of her favorite program. Good evening. Welcome to another nightly episode of The Dream Box. Serin loved the DJ's soft, soothing voice, and normally pricked up her ears for the entire show. But not today. She placed a piece of writing paper she'd picked up on the way home on her desk, and fell deep into thought with her chin on her hands. Her pen twirled round and round in her fingers before clattering to the desktop. Now for our next segment, Stories from the Listeners. Serin had never been the best writer. She'd written to the show many times, but they never picked her. As hope gave way to disappointment again and again, she learned that it was easier to just give up altogether. The show went on, and eventually, Serin sat up straight. She had to do this. The circled date on her desktop calendar said exams were coming up next week, but she could start thinking about them tomorrow. Right now, she had to focus on writing her letter. Serin looked from her notepad to her writing paper and trawled through her memories.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?